Again, I'd like to start off today by asking you a question once again. How funny are you? And the answer is hilarious. So you might remember that when you all came in here, you had to fill out a brief questionnaire, just one question. You had to rate your sense of humor on a scale from 1 to 9. Well, we tabulated the results, and it turns out that the average score was 7.4 out of 9. So in other words, you all are a quite funny group here. Now, give yourselves a hand. Good. Now, that might not surprise you. You guys seemed like a witty and funny bunch there in the break from people I talked to. But it might interest you to know that whenever I've done this same thing in psychology conferences or with my classes, I consistently get a score of around 7 out of 9. And this is not unique, by the way, to sense of humor. If you ask people to rate their intelligence or pretty much any other subjective positive trait, you consistently get a score that is well above the midpoint. And you can try this yourself with your friends and family. Anytime you have a large group of people, try it yourself, and I bet you'll get a similar result. Or if you want to do it in a less formal way, simply go up to any parents of school-age children and talk to them about their kids. And you'll quickly find that one of our biggest problems in society today is that schools just don't have enough accommodations for brilliant child geniuses, because it seems like that's all we have out there, right? Okay. So social psychologists call this the better than average effect. It's the effect that when people are asked to rate themselves, they consistently rate themselves as above average. And I think that was really shown today. As I said, you guys scored a 7.4 out of 9. The most interesting part to me is that only 2 people out of 97 were actually below the midpoint. So in this entire group, only 2 of you have a sense of humor that is below average. Amazing. Okay. So you might be thinking, well, this just shows that, people are all a bunch of arrogant and self-serving bastards, especially those damn kids today. And their braggart parents, right? But I think that's really only part of the explanation for the better than average effect. It's definitely true that, we like to feel good about ourselves and having a somewhat inflated view of ourselves. I'm smart, I'm funny, gosh darn it, people like me. That's good for our self-esteem. But there are errors we make in self-perception that are unrelated to how good we feel about ourselves. Sometimes we actually think that we're kind of a big old embarrassing mess. And that was demonstrated in a study in the 90s using this celebrity. Anyone in here recognize this person? A few of you? Who is it? Barry Manilow. Okay, yes, there must be some baby boomers in the audience there. This is indeed Barry Manilow. And Barry Manilow once described himself as the Justin Bieber of the 1970s, which is actually kind of an accurate self-perception. He was extremely popular in the 70s. However, by the 1980s, he had become very, very uncool. Some of you might remember the movie The Breakfast Club, where the kid asked the dorky principal, hey, does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe? So, clearly Barry Manilow in the 80s, very uncool. And researchers Gilovich and Savitsky took advantage of this fact for their study in the early 90s. What they did was they asked people to wear a Barry Manilow t-shirt in public. And then they asked people to guess how many other people would notice this embarrassing fashion faux pas. And it turned out that people vastly overestimated the number of other people who would notice what shirt that they were wearing. And this is not unique to t-shirts, by the way. This is true across a variety of embarrassing situations. People always feel like they're under a spotlight. They feel like other people are going to notice their mistakes, as well as actually their triumphs, more than other people actually do. And I think we can all take a little bit of comfort in this, because it means that anytime we have any kind of really embarrassing flub, like say screwing up a talk or something along those lines, other people are probably going to notice it much less than we will. Okay, so clearly we have some biases in self-perception, but still we probably know our own personality traits pretty well, right? Well, not entirely. Now, of course, this is a difficult question to answer because, how do you measure skill at knowing one's own personality traits? It's not like I can say, I'm a 72 out of 100 on introversion, and then someone else can come along and say, no, no, you forgot about that one party where you got drunk and danced on the table, so you're actually only a 61. It doesn't work that way. There's no completely objective standard, for measuring personality traits. But what we can do is compare our ratings of ourselves to other people's ratings of us. And some researchers at the University of Virginia did exactly that. What they did was they asked a bunch of people who knew each other well. So in this case, they asked sorority sisters and Army recruits who all lived in the barracks together, sorority sisters who all lived in their sororities together. And they asked them to rate not only themselves, but all of their peers on a bunch of personality traits. And what they found was that people basically agreed with each other a lot more than they agreed with the target person when it came to these personality traits. I don't know about you, but I found this almost a little bit depressing. It means that, I might think one thing about myself, and then my peers might think something a little bit different about me. But chances are my peers are going to agree with each other much more than they're going to agree with me. Okay. So when it comes to evaluating other people, clearly we're more objective than we are at evaluating ourselves. But are we always objective when it comes to evaluating other people? Well, not entirely. We are better at evaluating other people's personalities and other people's emotions. We're pretty decent there too. But we tend to make systematic errors in evaluating other people as well. In particular, we tend to overestimate the role of people's character traits and underestimate the role of the situation in evaluating other people. For example, let's say someone cuts in line in front of you at the grocery store. Now, your perception of that person might be that they're a jerk. However, you might not take into account situational factors like it's very crowded and all those kinds of things that might have caused the person to cut in front of you. And let's say that then you decided to confront the person and you want to know, why did they do this? Well, let's say that they say they didn't mean to do it, that they didn't even see you there. They cut in front of you by accident. Would you know if they're telling the truth? Okay. Well, generally speaking, people are actually really, really bad at detecting lies. Or to put it another way, people are very, very good liars. Across a variety of experimental paradigms, if people are trying to figure out whether or not someone is lying, they generally are going to be accurate about 54% of the time, if 50% is chance. So in other words, people are better than flipping a coin, but only just barely. As deception scholar Bella DePaulo says, there's no Pinocchio's nose. There's no one way to know whether or not somebody is lying. Now, what about when it comes to reading our friends? Do you think we'd be better at reading them? The answer here appears to be yes when it comes to truthful emotions. Basically, people are better at reading friends than strangers with truthful emotions. However, when we try to deceive each other, it turns out that we're actually not better at reading friends than strangers across most studies. Now, there's an exception to this. When it comes to our closest friends, we actually are better at reading them than strangers when it comes to detecting lies. Okay. So what's the bottom line here? Well, we're systematically biased when it comes to knowing ourselves, due in part to the self-serving bias and other kinds of systematic biases. We're more objective at evaluating other people, but we're still biased. We tend to take people at their word. We tend to overestimate the role of people's personality traits, and we tend to underestimate the role of the situation. So my advice is, don't get cocky when it comes to evaluating other people, particularly when it comes to deception detection. There's really no one cue that can indicate whether or not somebody is lying, and chances are you're going to be wrong almost as often as you're right. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me and perceiving me.